Welcome to Women, Men, and Relationships. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's show. Today I'm going to do a half and half. I'm going to record a little bit of new stuff in the first half and talk about how to deal with enjoying the holidays without the guilt, enjoying the holidays without too much of weight gain, doing some of the newer methods that we're doing and talking about today to help balance out what happens over the holidays. And I'm also going to re-release a show that I published a while back called The Truth About Sugar with Jeanne Peters, because I think we all need a reminder that all carbohydrates turn to sugar. Now, that doesn't mean that things like fruits and vegetables are bad for you because they turn to sugar. It just means that they turn to sugar. And as we reviewed in the show about keto diet, and I know there's a lot of you vegans out there, let me speak to this for a second. So depending on what you want to believe, you're going to find science to back that up. There was a movie called, I believe, What the Health? And I know that I saw several physicians that I trust and respect do a play-by-play on some of the things that were said, some of the claims that were made that actually weren't validated or substantiated with any science. So I'm sure it happens on both sides. And I'm not here to bash veganism by any means, because there's a lot of good things about being vegan, like eating more vegetables and more fruits and eating more simply. We all could benefit from having more greens in our diet, period. But on the flip side, I've worked with several people who've gained a lot of weight being vegan because they eat too many carbohydrates. So we have, depending on your stance about food, I'm here to give you nutritional advice based on science and the science that the people that I trust and have worked with and seen things work. I saw a post recently that said that the keto diet didn't work, and that couldn't be further from the truth, because I've had clients, as well as myself, who've had a really hard time losing weight and getting rid of some of the symptoms that they've had of being bloated and of losing their hair and having their metabolism be really off and having sort of Western conventional medicine not know what to do about it. And once they reduced the sugar in their diet and the carbohydrates and went more keto, not only did they lose weight, but their body went back to normal. So let me just remind you, whatever diet, whatever food plan you're going to follow, my recommendation for you is to try it and see how your body responds to it. Nutrition needs to be personalized, and regardless of what path you choose, there's still going to be sort of the best practice of each one of those diets, whether it be keto or vegan or paleo or grain-free. It doesn't matter. But again, it matters in terms of how your body responds and what you're willing to do or not do. Because after doing keto for 10 days, I loved the results and I loved what it helped me to heal. And I will do it again. Is it sustainable and easy to do? Absolutely not. So unless you have somebody else on board who you cook for or live with that is willing to do it. And I do kind of, but it's not necessarily something that I would suggest somebody sustains. I think that eating your vegetables is important and having your greens and your nutrients is absolutely important. But I also know from firsthand, as well as many clients I've worked with and people's bodies who's transformed and whose diabetes have reversed, that too many carbohydrates is not what our body needs. We don't move as much as we need to. And on top of that, most of your exercise programs suck. Sorry to tell you, but most of you are doing still cardio-based, calorie-counting exercise that doesn't focus on building muscle. And we're going to cover a little bit of that today. But before I get started, I just want to remind you of a couple things that are coming up very quickly. The Releasing What Weighs You Down, which is definitely going to be the last time I do it like this, will be January 10th to the 13th. There are still spaces, and I'm willing to work with you if you know you need to be there. Let's figure it out. I promise it'll be powerful. I promise it'll be worth it. And I just don't want you to miss out on an opportunity that may not come back. Because if cost is the issue, know that the future events are just going to be more because of how I need to change the location and where it's going to be. And I mean, I don't have to change it, but where it's going to change too. Okay. So I don't think it's going to get too much cheaper. So if it's about the cost and you think you can swing some kind of payment plan, reach out to me, because I'd rather you be there and for us to figure it out than to regret that you could never experience what happens in that room. Because remember, we have Lisa Thomas, who's doing clearing. She's doing inherited emotional DNA clearings, a couple of them actually during that, which that in itself is worth the price of the ticket. And then from there, you've got Jeanne Peters, who you're going to hear coming up here soon, talk about the truth about sugar, but she is doing brain health and detoxification. And of course, within that, it's going to be fat loss. And I'm sure she's going to answer questions about hormones and questions about carbohydrates versus protein versus fat. So that's all going to get covered in depth, as well as more personalized recommendations at the event. And then if the event is just not even possible, there is the virtual ticket. And with the virtual ticket, you get 3 months of accountability. So if you buy the ticket, you get the January recordings, which won't get to you till the end of January. You're going to get a February check-in, a March check-in, and an April check-in. So that in itself is worth way more than the price of the virtual ticket. And that's, again, to keep you on track. And then the last and cheapest option is the Manifestation Mastermind, in which you can focus on anything you want to. It is not entrepreneurs. It is not business-based. It is about manifesting. So if we're talking about manifesting love or relationships, it can be money and it can be health. And the goal is to have accountability, because most people do well and sustain their habits when they have accountability. And that is $97 a month, or $497 paid in full, starting in January, ending in June. It is a 6-month program, and I do have a few spots left. It is first come, first serve, so reach out to me if you need accountability. If you're waiting for the next free thing, that will be in March. That will be the Manifestation Challenge. But just remember, if you're someone who isn't following through with things, then it doesn't matter how much information you have. It's about keeping yourself accountable and figuring out a way to implement and integrate the information that you want to live into your life. And that's where the accountability piece is super important. So when it comes to the holidays and knowing that there are new foods, traditional foods, emotional situations that might lead to more eating, overeating, stress eating, casual eating, here's a couple different things to consider doing. The first one is going to be intermittent fasting, and we have not done a show yet, a full show, which we will, about intermittent fasting. There are 3 kinds of intermittent fasting I want to introduce you to. The first one is 16-8 method. That involves skipping breakfast and restricting your daily eating period to 8 hours, such as 1 to 9 p.m. Then you're going to fast for 16 hours in between. The point of intermittent fasting is, again, most of us are eating too much. We're eating too much sugar, and we're eating too many carbohydrates. We have too many calories we don't need in our body. So in order to utilize the sugar already in your blood, you're going to fast. So if you're on a day that's not a holiday celebration, or even if it is a day that has a holiday celebration, if you aim to do some intermittent fasting where you are only eating in an 8-hour period and you're fasting for the other 16, you actually may find that you sort of kind of come out even at the end, and you don't have either any or as much weight gain if you still choose to eat all the things that you want to eat during the holidays. So the 16-8 method, I think, is easier when you add a bit of keto into that, which means you're going to increase your fat intake. When I did the intermittent fasting and keto, that was the best, because when you're eating more fat, like when 70% of your calories are coming from fat, you are not hungry at all. Now, if that's too extreme for you during the holiday season, I understand that. But if you just increase your fat, first of all, you can't just decrease your carbs and not increase your fat, because that's not going to help you feel full. And if you don't feel full and you've got cravings, then you're going to feel restricted. You're going to be unhappy about it. And then you're going to say, screw it. And you're going to eat and overeat something just because. So try to increase more of healthy fats. And that would be nuts, nut butters, avocado, any of the dairy-free cheeses that are made from nuts or cashews, coconut creams, olive oils, what else? Sesame oil, again, just nuts in general. If you eat meat, more egg yolks, those will all, bacon, those will help you stay more full. So the 5-2 method is that you consume about 500 to 600 calories on 2 non-consecutive days of the week, but eat normally the other 5 days. So basically you're fasting for 2 days out of the week, not back to back, and you're eating 1 meal during that day. And you can play with which meal it is. Some people want to eat a really, good breakfast with, like I would say, eggs made it with grass-fed butter or the vegan butter or olive oil with an avocado, like a whole avocado. And make sure you have your egg yolks. And so you've got a lot of fat and you've got some protein and your B vitamins, and then you can kind of go about the rest of your day. If you can drink water and maybe some tea unsweetened. So if you can do that, now sometimes it stimulates people's cravings to eat in the morning. So maybe you wait and you have that meal or something similar to it at the end of the day. So the 5-2 plan means the other 5 days you eat normally, you eat whenever you want, you eat as much as you want. But at least you give your body 2 days of, again, utilizing the sugars already in your blood that you aren't using. Now, there's one more plan I don't talk about very much. It's called the Eat, Stop, Eat. This involves fasting for 24 hours once or twice a week. For example, by not eating from dinner one day until dinner the next day. So it wouldn't be like you wake up hungry. Again, it's still similar to the 5-2 method, except you're just doing it, and you can do it once or twice a week, but it is a full 24-hour fast. Okay, so those are the 3 ways that you can do some intermittent fasting. And again, the benefits of intermittent fasting is that you're going to increase your levels of growth hormone. And this has benefits for fat loss and muscle gain. Your insulin sensitivity improves and your levels of insulin drop. And lower levels of insulin make stored body fat more accessible to use when you're actually doing exercise or just using it for regular energy during the day. When you fast, your cells initiate cellular repair processes. So you're going to build more cells. You're going to strengthen your cells. And there are changes in the function of genes related to longevity and protection against disease. So you're strengthening your cells and you're changing the functions of the genes for longevity and protection against disease when you fast. Because remember, back in the caveman days, we didn't have food accessible all the time. You had to go hunt it. And maybe sometimes you didn't find it. You didn't find the berries if you weren't eating meat. But if you were hunting anything or picking anything, think about winter. I mean, what are you eating vegetable-wise in the winter if you're somewhere? So in terms of our bodies are built to fast and fast in a scientific way. So think about intermittent fasting during the holidays on the days that you're not with people, that you're not having a party or with family, okay? And the other thing, of course, is to go back and listen to the show with Jimmy about keto and about the days that you're not eating with everybody else. I mean, I can tell you from experience, after doing 10 days of keto, I felt like my metabolism shifted. I felt like my body was burning more from fat than it was from carbohydrates. And I was taking the test, the strips that you do with your urine or your saliva, which is not the most efficient way to do it, but it was the easiest, fastest, cheapest way for me to try it. And eventually in the future, I may get a little bit more interested in more accurate testing. But for now, the point was taken. I know my body. I know how it responds. So some version of intermittent fasting and keto during the holidays will help you curb some of those sugar cravings, will help balance out the days they're kind of going off the deep end and celebrating, which is totally fine and totally cool. But you don't have to do it every day is the point, right? And then, of course, we're going to get into the show here with Jeanne Peters about sugar. And hopefully that will remind you when you're eating to make a choice between something that's terribly carbohydrate and something, like instead of having carbs at all 3 meals, pick 1 or 2 that are the most important to you. It's really a time to ask yourself, is this the right time to be having something that's really super carbohydrate? Is this the best use of that? And being able to make some other choices, like there's some sugar substitutes that are better than others, using that in some of those cooking and baking goods that you do to eliminate some of the sugar in there. So it's just food for thought. And I thought rather than during Thanksgiving, I re-released the show we did about oil, but I did it like the day before Thanksgiving. So this time I'm giving you a couple weeks to think about all of the sugar and all the extra carbohydrates that we usually consume, and of course get mad at ourselves and make New Year's resolutions. I just want to stop the cycle, and I want to give you tools to help you balance some of the fun and pleasure that you're going to have with food, with the understanding that you can do this biochemically, you can do this with some fasting and come out ahead at the end. So I hope you enjoyed today's show with Jeanne. Hello and welcome to Fit to Love Wellness Wednesdays. Today's show, The Truth About Sugar. We have back one of our very favorite guests, Jeanne Peters. Jeanne Peters is a registered dietitian and healthy aging expert with a mission to help men and women feel more vital energy through the healing power of whole foods and lifestyle medicine. In practice for over 33 years, she specializes in optimizing women's hormone health, digestive and thyroid disorders, and how to break through weight loss resistance. She co-founded the Nourishing Wellness Medical Center with partner Dr. Alan Peters, who specializes in bioidentical hormone health and homeopathy for men and women. Welcome back to the show for season 2, Jeanne.
Hey, thanks, JJ. It's great to be here.
Well, we love you,
Mm.
and you're a wealth of knowledge, and the audience loves you, and I love you.
Mm.
So why not just continue to bring you back?
Little love fest going on here, right?
We love you, Jeanne. We love you. And one of the things that came up in season 1 on one of the shows that you and I had done was sugar. And there were so many questions from clients, from listeners about different kinds of sugar and sort of making sense of sugar substitutes. And I've heard people talking about sugar-free diets, but yet they're still eating carbohydrates. So I really want to break down the truth about sugar. There's
Sure.
just so much to know. And I know we're not going to get to all of it in this short podcast that we're going to do today, but let's just skim the surface. Let's start out by, and for those of you that haven't heard Jeanne on a show, Jeanne is the number one guest of the Fit to Love podcast show, both for Tasty Tuesdays and for Wellness Wednesdays. So check out one of her many shows on season 1.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, hopefully I can live up to that. But believe me, if you had to choose like a show to start off this new series, sugar is a really great place because it's one of the things that's really contributing to so many of the health issues that we see in our practice, JJ. And yeah, let's break it down and hopefully we can inspire people to be a little bit more aware of cutting back on sugar, all
Right.
forms.
And let's talk about those. Let's just get this out of the way for anyone listening. All of the different illnesses, chronic pain and illness and disease and health effects that sugar has on us. I just sort of want to skim the surface. I know that everybody knows sugar is not good for you. So, but let's just go over sort of the impact that sugar is having on our bodies.
Yeah, I think that's a really good place to start because, we got a major obesity crisis, but we've also got, blood pressure issues, people that are suffering from mood swings and headaches and even things like anxiety, brain fog. Much of this is related to like the excess amount of carbohydrates that people are consuming, and carbohydrates all turn to sugar. The only thing that maybe varies is just how quickly they turn to sugar. So for example, whether you're looking at like an apple, you're looking at apple juice, you're looking at a soda, or you're just looking at teaspoons of sugar that you put into your coffee or tea, they all eventually turn into sugar. And what happens, JJ, is you could think of like your muscles and your liver, which need that sugar for energy. You could think of them as like a sponge. So your body will break down those foods that contain carbohydrates into sugar, and then your body uses something called insulin, which is like a carrier to help transport that sugar from your bloodstream into the muscles and the liver, where then the body can store that. So think of it as like a sponge. Think of your muscles and liver like a sponge, and your body will continue to fill up those holes in your muscles and your liver until it reaches a saturation point. After that point, anything more that you consume, your body has to store it. So that's when it starts storing some of that sugar in the form of fat in the liver. And so that's contributing to a major crisis we have right now with fatty liver. And then the second thing is just excess amount of carbs will turn to fat, and usually it goes straight to the belly because that's a quick and easy way to store it. So, anybody that's got belly fat is probably eating more carbohydrates than their body's able to utilize for energy. So as that starts to build up, you get obesity as being one issue. But if you start driving too many carbs into your body, you also start driving up insulin. And insulin, we now recognize, is a hormone that contributes to fast aging. So insulin is great in terms of just getting sugar into your cells where your body needs it. But if you start putting too much insulin out, it actually has the ability to drive more fat into your fat cells. There's a lot more here, but probably the biggest one is obesity, and then just excess insulin is contributing now to things like blood pressure problems. It contributes to heart palpitations in some people. It can contribute to actually shrinking your brain, JJ. So, and then mood swings, just the ups and downs of having too much sugar in your blood and then all of a sudden, lowering sugar. Just that up and down roller coaster effect really can increase anxiety and mood swings and just general fatigue. That's enough probably just to build a picture. So let me just stop and just see if that seems clear.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're good. That's enough reason. And I know blood sugar regulation is an issue for people, and that also can contribute. And you're mentioning about fast aging. So I'm sure there's some kind of cell damage too with too much sugar in the blood and too much. I've heard of infections. And have you heard of infections?
Yeah, absolutely. Think about like whenever you put too much sugar in, one of the first things that happens is your immune system gets on overwhelm. The immunity is really interesting. So that's like your key response team, like your inner paramedics, fire department, police department. I mean, you've got a team within your body that's looking to respond to like emergencies. But you start flipping too much sugar into your bloodstream, you really make it difficult for the immunity to go and work effectively. So that's one thing. The other thing is that if you've ever dropped sugar, on the floor and there was like something wet and it got sticky, it takes a lot of scrubbing to make sure you get that all otherwise cleaned up. Otherwise, things will tend to stick to it. You've probably had that experience. Well, the same thing is true in your blood. If you have too much sugar in your blood and you don't clear all of it out, it ends up sticking to the red blood cells of your body. So blood cells will start to clump together. And if they clump together in such a way that they can't get into the tiny little capillaries that feed your eyes, your fingertips, your toes, one of the first signs of prediabetes is that people's eyesight isn't as good because they don't have the clarity because they're not getting the blood flowing in and out of those tiny little capillaries. Or people might feel like their fingertips or their toes they don't have the circulation that they used to. Well, that's because these little tiny capillaries are not receiving this oxygenated blood because they're clumped up in such a way that they can't literally, one blood cell going into one capillary at a time isn't happening. So we know those are all signs of like early diabetes, but there's a lot more. I mean, there's probably 100 things I could talk about that are related to excess sugar. But anytime you have excess sugar, you're going to have excess insulin. So insulin is the carrier, and insulin makes your cells more brittle, tends to make your blood vessels a little bit less elastic. So you've got a whole set of issues with sugar and issues set up with insulin, and they're both connected.
Great. So now we have a very clear picture of all the reasons why we want to reduce our sugar intake. And to be clear, all carbohydrates turn into sugar. And you said the difference is how much, right? And how fast.
Yeah, it's like related to fiber. So like an apple is going to take longer to break down because there's more fiber in it than, let's say, drinking a glass of apple juice. So that helps build a picture too that foods that are higher in fiber are going to make that sugar move into the bloodstream in a better and healthier way. One of the reasons why we really push fiber or foods made with fiber.
Right. So vegetables and fruit are still going to turn into sugar. They're just going to do it at a slower pace,
Right.
which won't spike your insulin level.
Exactly.
Well, and an apple and a vegetable in terms of the makeup has less sugar than a glass of apple juice.
Yeah, really
right?
good point. Like if you have like a juicer, it'll take 3 apples to make like an 8-ounce glass of apple juice. Like one apple will make about a third of a cup. So, you drink a cup of apple juice, you can drink that in 5 minutes. It takes you to eat 3 apples. It probably would take most people. Most people wouldn't even finish 3 apples unless they were super hungry. But, it's probably going to take a good couple of hours. Whenever you have to chew slowly, it's providing a way in which that sugar is entering into the system in a way that the body can really handle it better, JJ. So yeah, it's a good analogy.
Okay. So now let's start talking about and breaking down the different kinds of sugars that are out there.
Mhm.
And most of the people, I hope, that are part of the Fit to Love community are people that aren't necessarily doing chemical-based sweeteners and fake sugar, so to speak. And those would be the saccharin and the
Aspartame and
aspartame
sucralose
and sucralose,
Yeah.
which is found in Splenda.
Mhm.
so just for, in case anyone out there is still using any of these, can you give everybody just a quick overview of why we don't want to be using these?
Yeah, sweetener lesson 101. Let's just talk about, why you want to avoid artificial sweeteners like the plague. Part of it is just all of these vary in their sweetness capacity from being anywhere from, let's say, maybe 10 to 15 times sweeter than sugar, up to like 400 times sweeter than sugar. So just that, when you put something on your tongue that's 400 times sweeter than sugar, we didn't realize 25 years ago that that actually immediately stimulates your pancreas to say, uh-oh, something sweet is coming. Let's start putting out a little bit of insulin. It's like the body is preparing because the tongue has it's almost like a sentry, like in front of a castle. Like there's a way in which the person who's guarding the gate has a way of being able to communicate to the rest of the troops inside. And that's what's happening with artificial sweeteners. They're so sweet that they're actually impacting our insulin. So in fact, like they're finding out right now that the impact of like a diet soda can actually raise your insulin levels. And even though you're not putting calories in, that has an impact because I mentioned insulin is something that has its own impact on your health. The second thing is that when those artificial sweeteners come into the gut, we actually have certain types of bacteria that will extract more calories from the foods that you consume, particularly around artificial sweeteners. So the way that those artificial sweeteners are communicating to that group of bacteria, Bacteroides, and I forget what the Firmicutes, I believe is the other one, they actually like flip a switch in which they're able to extract more calories. So even though you may be consuming something that has 1 or 2 calories, like in the case of a diet soda, this type of bacteria is able to extract more calories from the other foods that you're consuming. So that's something that was sort of surprising as researchers started looking more into these artificial sweeteners. And then the last thing is that they change your taste buds, JJ. Did you ever drink diet sodas?
Oh God, not really. I think I've never ever liked the taste.
Yeah, I did for a period of time, when I was like in my 20s and 30s, I was drinking a diet soda every day. And, I just got used to the taste of it. Then I decided I wanted to get off of all this stuff because I was trying to get off of caffeine. And when I went back to taste a diet soda, like maybe 6 months later, I was just shocked that I even reached a point where I was able to tolerate it because it is so much sweeter. And so your taste buds start to shift so that we want things that are sweeter than we would otherwise if we weren't consuming these. So that has an impact even on, your endocrinology and your metabolism.
Right. So people have heard that diet soda is worse than regular soda for these reasons, and that diet soda can cause weight gain more than regular soda for the reasons of the increase in insulin from the pancreas, right?
And
As well as the change in
gut
our
bacteria.
yep, gut bacteria and now our cravings and our taste buds because now we want more sugar
Exactly.
because everything's been shifted by us being used to having something 400 times sweeter than sugar.
It's true, so and you know what? You really have to be a good label reader because there's so many drinks and beverages that are on the market right now that are using, they become more aware of the fact that consumers in general are trying to cut back on artificial sweeteners. So sometimes what they're doing is using some artificial sweeteners with stevia. So, and honestly, some of the print is so tiny, and I'm at the age right now where I literally have to have 6-foot arms to read some of these ingredients. So I have to bring a magnifying glass or something because I can't always read some of these things. I don't necessarily buy this stuff, but you got to do your research for my clients. So,
Well, and we want to know.
yeah.
We want to know what those labels are so that we know what to look for, and we are going to get to that. But
Yeah.
before we get to that, I do want to move into, you mentioned it, so let's go there. Stevia.
Yeah.
So the no calorie natural sweetener that people know about is stevia. And you just mentioned something that sounded like a company was trying to disguise stevia. Is there something bad about stevia?
Nothing wrong with stevia, but it's one of the things that's been challenging for a lot of the drink and beverage and companies that are interested in trying to sweeten foods in a more natural way. I mean, stevia is a plant. I've had it growing in my garden. The flowers sweeteners actually produce a very bright, strong, but a little bit bitter tasting flour. So they are able to process the flour and the leaves into a sweetener that's about 30 times sweeter than sugar. So it's not nearly that intensely sweet that you get with like aspartame or sucralose, but it's still sweet. So one of the challenges with stevia is that it's very safe in its natural form, and it can be used to sweeten most dishes and drinks, but it's something in which sometimes you get a little bit of a bitter taste. So that's been a challenge for food manufacturers in terms of how they could work with it. And some people, some drink companies, for example, are using just small amounts of it with the sucralose just to find the right blend, or they're using stevia with even a little bit of sugar just so that they're not putting as much sugar into drinks. So I think, if somebody has to use something in which they want a sugar substitute, stevia could be a good alternative for people. But just be aware of the fact that because of its being bitter, you might have to play with it a little bit to be able to find out how you can use it.
And different companies' products taste different. I've experienced myself because I'm not a big fan of it, but I have found different products that do work and that taste better than others. And I've got about 10 other questions on different sweeteners. We're going to go over all the other sweeteners on the market, what the differences are, which ones have less sugar, which ones are really no different, and all those different labels. Okay, Jeannie, so we've discussed that stevia is a no-calorie, natural sweetener, 30 times sweeter than sugar, has a little bit of an aftertaste. If you like it, it's safe and healthy, yes? Okay, so what's the next best sugar substitute?
A good substitute is something called Lohan. Lohan, sometimes it goes by Lohan Go. It's something that's found it's like out of China, and it's also a bit more expensive than stevia. It's a fruit that's been used as a sweetener for centuries. It's about 200 times sweeter than sugar. The good news about it is that the FDA puts out a list called generally recognized as safe. And if a sweetener ends up on that list, it's definitely got a good thumbs up. And they got that status back in 2009. And it goes into the bloodstream a little bit more slower. It's not something that's going to raise blood sugars as quickly, but it's still 200 times sweeter than sugar. So, I mean, you still have some of those other issues that we're dealing with, which is that your taste threshold is going to be altered by it. But it certainly has this safe status that, many of the other artificial sweeteners are still, and some of them have not made that list.
And they won't. And what about xylitol?
Yeah, xylitol, again, one of the key things that's nice about xylitol is that it's a sugar alcohol. So anything with OL at the end of the name means that it has the sweetness of sugar, but it's kind of functions in the body a little bit more like alcohol. So it contains fewer calories. Xylitol in particular is one in which it actually improves the mouth bacteria that live in your mouth. So that's why, in fact, a lot of chewing gum manufacturers, and they were using like toothpaste or mouthwashes, oftentimes they'll use xylitol in there because it actually helps improve the overall bacterial balance. The other kind of downside about xylitol, and I'm somebody that suffers from this, sometimes we'll get like a little bit of a loose stool because these alcohols don't get digested very effectively towards the end of the digestive process. So some people might notice that they might have a little bit of like thin stools. But xylitol in comparison has a great effect on your blood sugar. So it's a much better choice than, let's say, using plain old sugar.
And what about coconut sugar, date sugar?
Yeah, all of those are really nice, JJ. Although they still provide sweetness, they're not nearly as refined as what you would find in like white table sugar. So like a coconut sugar, if you eat coconut, you tend to taste a little bit of that natural sweetness that's there. Have you ever had the coconut pudding that's just naturally found in like a young coconut?
I drink coconut water that comes right out of the coconut.
Right, so it has a slightly sweet taste. So there's just some natural sugars that are found in there. There's not added sugar, but it's just some of the natural sugars that are found in those carbohydrates. And when they process that in such a way, they're able to go ahead and pull out, it crystallizes a little bit. That coconut sugar isn't going to be as strong as, let's say, white table sugar, but that's in fact why it's so beautiful, because you can get, maybe a nice sweetening effect. Let's say if you were making an apple crisp and you could put a little bit of it into the oats, without having that sharp, intense sweet taste and without having the tremendous impact on your blood sugars. So I like coconut sugar. I've been using it, and I have used date sugar. Some of these vary in price. thankfully the coconut sugar is coming down because, they just got massive coconut groves that are producing right now for, this country's amazing desire for anything, coconut water, coconut milk, coconut sugar.
And I use coconut sugar and date sugar because of being paleo, and I've really enjoyed it. But I've heard sort of people talk about, these are still
Sugar.
sugar.
Yeah, they're going to still
And
spike your
so,
blood.
so there are better choices, but we're still looking at the fact that it's still sugar. Now, I'm going to go back a few steps. Stevia has no calories.
Right.
Lohan, does that have
It
calories?
does. I probably should know it off. That's probably about 2 calories in a teaspoon. Most white table sugar is 4 calories, so it's like half as much.
And xylitol has calories. Is it also half as much?
I think it is, JJ, and I should know it, but off the top of my head, I don't. But
Okay.
it definitely
I know
has,
it's less
yeah.
calories. And then coconut sugar and date sugar, I know has less calories, but unfortunately, because it is less sweet, people tend to use twice as much, right? Just to get that kind of
to get the same amount of sweetness. So it makes it sometimes a little bit more expensive than regular sugar, and certainly, you probably end up using more.
So let's quickly, I know the show just went by so fast and people have probably a ton of questions. And so if you're listening and you still have more questions, so let's talk about recommendations of sugar. How much sugar? Is there a better time to be having sugar? Is there a terrible time to be having sugar? And how much do we want to be, what forms do we want it in?
Yeah, it's a great question. 2 quick tips I can give to people. Everybody can benefit if we just consider trying to dial down our taste for sugar. So that can come in a couple of ways. One is that if you're used to using any sweeteners, whether it's sugar or even artificial sweeteners, maybe just start dialing that down so that you're using less. Put everything in half and just see how you do, because that right there, that's going to help, weaning yourself off of some of these sweet foods and beverages over a period of time is going to help improve your health. The second thing to look at is if you can at least consume sugary, if you eat, let's say, a piece of chocolate, or you have it with something that's got some protein or fat. Like, for example, if I buy chocolate, I'm always going to buy it with almonds, because just the fat in the almonds is going to help slow down how quickly that sugar enters in my bloodstream. Or I might have a piece of dark chocolate with maybe a cup of hazelnuts. So fat plus a carb, the fat will slow down how quickly that sugar rushes into your bloodstream. And then if you're somebody who enjoys, something sweet with a meal, consider possibly having, something like protein with it. So for example, I love fruit. I'm eating a lot less of it these days, but if I have it, I'm going to have it with a piece of cheese, or I might have it with, maybe I would put berries into my yogurt, because the protein and the fat in the yogurt will slow down how quickly the sugar metabolizes.
What about those of us that are dairy free?
Yeah, I mean, you could do something again with some other kind of protein. So let's say you have a piece. Well, give me an example of something that you eat that's sweet.
Well, one of my favorite breakfast additions is I make a raw macadamia nut cream that I did on the show, and it's basically macadamia nuts. There's a little bit of fresh squeezed orange juice in there and a date, and you blend that all up, and then I put it on a peach. So
fantastic. Well, that's a perfect example where the macadamia nuts are providing the fat. So you're already slowing down just, let's say the sugar from that peach is going to be less impacted just because you've got that fat there. So that's fantastic, JJ. That's a perfect example of what we're talking about.
And then to make it even better, what would be best would for me to have an egg or two before I even eat that.
You could do that, but even just sometimes, these cashew creams or macadamia nut, nuts are amazing in terms of how they provide and macadamia in particular, because they're one of the lowest in sugar. They have the least amount of carbohydrates of any nut on the planet. So you're not getting for sure any sugar, and the amount of carbohydrates in there that you would find is relatively low. And that raises another little tip. So if you're somebody who's like a baker, or likes to cook things from scratch like you do, JJ, using your vanilla or your cinnamon, things that naturally enhance the flavor of things that are sweet, will allow you to maybe dial back on how much sugar you might put into a recipe, and you still could end up with really great results.
Absolutely. Besides the peach and raw macadamia nut cream, which, by the way, everybody, season 1, episode 70 on Tasty Tuesdays, episode 70. I also just will open up a peach when it's the season and sprinkle cinnamon on it.
Oh, wonderful. See, I love that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you. Ever since going paleo and changing sugars. Oh, and I know we have to mention this and we're running out of time, but quickly on the honey, because that's what I didn't get, because part of the paleo sugar, right, is not using white refined sugar, but coconut sugar, date sugar, dates, and then honey and maple syrup. So can you talk to the honey maple syrup
Oh,
conversation?
sure. I mean, I have to speak out on, honey because I'm somebody that I love the effect of raw honey has for people who have allergies. So, honey is just naturally really high in fructose, but it's natural in its raw form and it's got a lot of health benefits when used in moderation. So, for example, if you like to use like a teaspoon of raw honey in, let's say, a cup of hot tea, I mean, it fools your metabolism a little bit because fructose doesn't stimulate insulin in the same way that other sugars like table sugar will do. So, and then it also has so many benefits because raw honey helps improve your immunity. So, people who tend to have like seasonal allergies, if they can find a honey that's just found, let's say, in the local area, that can really help dial down like the body's natural response to some of the pollens that are found in the air. So, there's a wonderful benefit there.
So it's not just an old wives' tale to
Oh,
have some
no.
tea with
Oh, no,
honey,
that's fantastic. Now, I'll tell you, you were talking about maple syrup, and then we have to talk about agave because agave probably
right?
is, everybody thinks agave is like the darling, and we should be using it because, it comes from the agave plant, but it also is super high in fructose. And fructose, a good way of explaining that is it's almost like supercharged kindling. Like when you go ahead and break down things with fructose, it tends to put out a lot of heat in the body. So all the agave that's being manufactured right now, for the most part, is like a super condensed fructose syrup. It doesn't really have much nutrient value. I really kind of frown on it, even like the raw agave, because we're just putting out so much of it. And, you'd be better off if you're using it, really dial it down and maybe switch to actually using a little bit of honey if you like a sweetener.
And maple syrup.
Maple syrup, I mean, again, the just the whole processing of maple syrup, you're going to get a pretty strong, you get a little bit of fructose that's in there. It's not as high as like an agave. Agave, like, I think it's 70 to 90% high fructose corn syrup, or it's more of a super condensed fructose syrup. You don't get that as much with maple syrup. But here again, these are really strong sweeteners, JJ. You could probably get by with using, if a recipe called for a quarter of a cup of maple syrup, and you start experimenting with using other ingredients like cinnamon and vanilla, you might be able to get by with half that amount.
So I do a paleo, grain-free, of course, gluten-free, and even dairy-free chocolate chip cookie bar. It's episode 26 in season 1, and it's paleo, so the only sugar is honey. And it's actually a third of a cup of honey. And because it's not super sweet, and I use my own homemade almond meal to make it just a little bit sweeter, I add a dash of cinnamon.
Oh, fantastic.
Again, to sort of cut and then you're going to have the chocolate chips in there. And I use a brand that actually is sweetened with stevia. And it's completely dairy free and there's no casein or whey. And
send some on
there's
my
no
way.
sugar.
I'm ready for a piece right now.
I just made them yesterday for a birthday. I literally make them all the time. And everywhere I go, I'm like, episode 26, episode 26.
I'll have to go.
It's like,
I'll go and check it out.
It's my marketing.
Okay.
So, okay, good. Okay. So I know there's probably still sugars we haven't covered, but we are running out of time. And I want to make sure everybody knows that if they want to start working on this with somebody, that they can come to you. So Jeanne, can you tell us a little bit how people can reach you and some of the services that you offer?
Yeah, I'm a registered dietitian. I've been in private practice for 34 years. I work in tandem with my husband at the Nourishing Wellness Medical Center. You can just go to our website, nourishingwellness.com. Feel free to go ahead and send me an email if you have a quick question, JP for Jeanne Peters at nourishingwellness.com. Both great ways to reach me.
And like always, Jeanne will be back for more Wellness Wednesdays, and you can watch her on Tasty Tuesdays. We did a lot of great Tasty Tuesdays in season 1. Make sure to check those out. Jeanne, as always, a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, JJ. We'll talk soon.